I thought being an agent, it was going to be this super sexy thing. You'd be signing all these deals and traveling the world and stuff like that. And I did travel a lot, but my first job for Ray was taking his daughter to the Nike store because uh, Cap had given his daughter some gift cards to the Nike store. That was the very first thing he had me do. So I was essentially babysitting his kid, and that's not what I wanted to be doing, but I did it.
That was Matt Sonnenfeldt today on the Running Effect podcast. I've long gotten questions, DMs about, will I have an agent on the podcast? People are curious about that world, which a lot of times has a lot of question marks around it. So I wanted to get Matt on the podcast. He's been so good to me over the past year, helping me get some of the guests that I have on. He's an agent with Flynn Sports Management, headed by Ray Flynn, who I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with. And Matt, back in the day, was a stud himself in the great state of Tennessee, where he was a Tennessee state cross-country champion in 2008. And I believe that same season included a trip to the Foot Locker National Cross Country Championships, where he made it out of the South region. He then went on to run for the University of Kentucky and then NC State, I believe, as he shares in this conversation, and then got into the world of running management, being an agent. And so first part of this conversation is dedicated to Matt's journey in the sport, because I was fascinated by it, wanted to give some context to him as a human being and as an athlete. And then the back half, I grill him and ask him all sorts of questions that I'm fascinated about in terms of the sport of running, the state of running, what it's like to be an agent, NIL deals, pro running deals, what he would change with the sport, and so much more. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm so appreciative for Matt taking the time to speak with me. I really enjoyed this one. If you enjoyed as well, share it with a friend, a teammate, someone who you think would find value and benefit from it. Give us a follow or a 5-star review wherever you're listening, and hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss another episode. And with all those notes aside, enjoy this thoughtful conversation with the one and only Mr. Agent himself, Matthew Sonnenfeldt. Matt Sonnenfeldt, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm great.
We were texting briefly about scheduling this podcast, and you were like, or maybe it wasn't over text. Maybe it was over the link that I send where you can add some notes about like your peers or something. And I think you said, to quote, you were like, I don't know if it'd be relevant for your audience. So here I am thinking that you were probably some washed hobby jogger back in the day who, ran in high school, and that's how you got into the sport, but didn't do much and then became an agent. No. Okay. My guest research team, I'm reading these notes and I'm just like, my mouth is on the floor. I don't know what you're talking about. You made it to Foot Locker Nationals. You captured the Tennessee State Cross Country Championship in 2008. So what would you say in terms of the running world? Are people aware you were a stud back in the day, or do you play this off with everyone?
I don't think anyone knows who I am, period. So I don't know if anyone's looking up my name regardless. But no, it's not something I broadcast in my job very often. I mean, I run, I love it, but it's kind of a tough thing to fit in the conversation too. I'm not
Sure.
gonna just volunteer. Hey, yeah, like I ran in high school, I was okay, and I ran collegiately and I was okay. It's not something that comes up very often. You're focused on the athletes and what they're doing. So, if someone asks, I tell them. But
Of course, you never, made the Olympics or ran at like a professional high level, but you definitely ran at high levels, in high school and in college. Whether or not you think so, I'll just say it to your face. I think you did. Do you feel like that has allowed you to relate to your athletes in a deeper way, rather than if you didn't really have the experience of even making a Foot Locker, or like knowing what it's like to train hard and have goals?
yeah, I do. Certainly, you have to train hard to be good at any level, and so I feel like that helps. But on the flip side of things too, we're not coaches, and so the advice you give to the athletes tends to be less training related, and the athletes that we're working with too. They probably don't need my advice on the running front as well. They've far exceeded the things that I have done, so I tend not to volunteer that stuff up too much unless it's asked as well.
What was the state of the sport back in 2008 as a high schooler? What did high schoolers care about in running? There were no super shoes. You probably just had Runner's World, no Instagram. What was that world like?
A simpler time, man. You just
No
went out and
triple
raced.
threshold?
No, you just went out and raced. I mean, I was super into the sport. I mean, it was kind of like dice that era. So that's kind of where you got a lot of your information on the message boards there, and I was super into it. So the state of keeping up with the competitors was a little different. The biggest thing was getting results. I remember waiting for results to come a day or two later, just to see what my competitors were doing. So I was definitely super into it, but yeah, d definitely different than it is now. We weren't really focused on what we were wearing on our shoes, or um, you know, you weren't really traveling across the country from meet to meet. There's all these fantastic meets now. Every company has a high school showcase event, which is awesome. It's more opportunities for the high school athletes, which is really cool. When I was in high school, it was Foot Locker, which was kind of like the individual event, and then you had I think it was Nike Cross Nationals, which was like the team, or Nike Team Nationals rather, which was like the team event. And so in cross country, that was it. Like you did one of those two events, you couldn't do both. And then outdoors, there was nothing. It was Nike Outdoor Nationals in Greensboro, North Carolina. So you went out and you ran that. There wasn't, Brooks PR. There wasn't the Hoka Festival of Miles and stuff like that. There was Melrose and New Balance Grand Prix indoors, but far more opportunities now for high schoolers than when I was running.
At the Foot Locker South Regional, when you earned your spot to run at Foot Locker Nationals in San Diego, you ran 14:50. Was this at McAlpine or a
It
different
was.
course?
It
That
was.
time would have won
And
this year, man.
I thought you were going to say that's not as impressive anymore, but
No, that's
that,
what I was
that
gonna say because
yeah.
I think the past 2 years. So I've been the past 2 years because I've done a lot with like Hoka
Mhm.
event marketing for their events, and they always send me to the South Regional. So I've been there the past 2 years. I think last year Patrick Kuhn won, so 2023. I think he broke 14:50. This year, I think Keegan Smith, who won, ran like 14:52. So man, in a different era, you could have been a South
Well,
Regional champion.
maybe I still got beat. I didn't even win.
Crazy. Who was the guy back then? 2008.
Who was the guy? The guy who won Foot Locker was Solomon Halle. You probably don't know his name. Maybe you do. He ended up running at Arkansas. Trevor Dunbar, one of my good friends, was rolling. He was really good. A guy named Jacob Zyvik was really good. He ran at Florida State. On the women's side, Jordan Hasse was crushing it. Gosh, you really really bring me back now. Um, I wouldn't have put myself in those conversations. That place back when I was running, the South had a stigma. We just never it was we never showed up at nationals, and it was true.
How much do you follow the sport in high school these days, or is it mostly college and pro?
I followed it probably more in the last couple years. When I got to college, I didn't really follow it too much, and then when I got out of college, probably not that much too. I try to keep up with the Tennessee boys just because I'm a Tennessee guy. But on the pedestal of what I follow, it's probably lower on the list. But with NIL these days, you have to really keep an eye on everything.
How crazy, you mentioned following Tennessee guys. You guys have had quite the past few years. Keegan
I know.
Smith, Will
I
Connolly,
I
Colin
left and
Eckerman.
they just went
Yeah.
crazy.
What's your take on it? Good time to be a Tennessee fan.
Yeah, I love it. I love it when people represent the state. Keegan's from Knoxville, and he's been running really well. When I graduated, Aaron Templeton came a couple, 2 or 3 years later, and he was really good. The state's always had great representation. You can go all the way back to Andrew Bumbalo, and he was kind of my guy I looked up to in high school, who ended up going running pro at Bowerman and making world teams for them. Now it just seems like there's more bulk. There's you know 4 or 5 bumpies, right? 5 or 6 me's, right? So there's just more. There's just more people doing far better than what I did and what my competitors did back in the day. So it's great to see. A lot of people focus on, and rightfully so, focus on California and Texas, and Illinois, the kind of the legendary states, right, for cross country running. And Tennessee, being a small southern state, is one that's probably overlooked in terms of where you look for great runners. But there's been a lot. So whenever whenever it catches the eye of a good Tennessee runner, then it's always good. And the women have been really well. Been doing really well too. I mean, Kathy, you can go all the way back to Kathy Kroger, who was running. I don't know if you know that name. She went to Stanford. So you gotta, yeah, look some of these names up.
I know. Homework today. Wasn't Brody Hasty? Now I'm remembering. Wasn't he from Tennessee as well?
Oh yeah, Brody. Yeah, Brody would
Yeah,
have been
because
a
I just
Tennessee guy
remember
too.
he was so good. Because I think he played second at NXM, but he had like the signature stride, the signature kick, and then he went on to NAU. But I remember that was like right before COVID. It was like him, Cooper
Hmm.
Tier. That group of
Yeah,
guys was really fun. So,
yeah. He
um,
was Nashville. He went to Brentwood High School,
yes,
where
yeah.
one of my best friends went to, and I competed against. So that school he went to was has just turned out a lot of great athletes.
Let's go back in time and chronicle some of this before we get into the agent talk. Take me through your start in the sport. Give me some history and context to the point where you even cared about a Foot Locker
Yeah.
Nationals.
So, anyone who knows me knows what my answer is going to be, and it starts with my parents. They both ran at the University of Tennessee in the early 80s. Um, and so my dad had a youth athletics program that he started, and he ran that athletics program through the Knoxville school system. And started an elementary and middle school track program. There's a competitive program aspect to it. So I more or less like grew into it. Now, how how serious I got and when that happened kind of happened organically. My parents did a really good job of not pushing me towards it. My first love was football. I wanted to be a football player, and they let me play football
UT
as
could
long
use
as
you
I.
as a quarterback right now.
You
Sorry,
know,
keep going.
yeah, yeah, that was a low blow. So yeah, I played soccer. They let me play every sport, which I think is important. And um, I think I just started getting more into it the better I got, like a lot of people. But I like showing up to practice. A lot of my friends were runners, so I think just organically, come my eighth grade year, I did really well. And my dad sit me down and say, "Hey, look, when you get to high school, we probably need to make a decision with football or track." And at that point in time, he let me have the decision. It wasn't like, "Hey, buddy, you're far better at track comparatively than you are football, and the chances of you being successful with our with our genes are probably is going to be track is rather than with track." So um, even with that, he let me make the decision, and I chose track. I guess I don't really know why. It just seemed like it just came natural. So then, I was decent and ran in high school, and was lucky enough to get a scholarship. My freshman year, I actually went to the University of Kentucky, and then I ended up transferring to NC State my last 4 years. Um, and that kind of culminates into where I am now. It's just an evolution of, you know, how into it I got.
Something I want to ask you about is that point at which you realized you didn't have a future in the sport in terms of like the next stage. So this, I'm sure, happened in college at some point of like, oh, I'm probably not gonna go pro or get a big
Yeah.
contract out of college. What was that shifting point like for you of wanting to stay in the sport and ultimately staying in the sport? Because I think one of the big reasons I want to have a conversation with you is people don't realize the extent to which you can stay. Like for me, the minute I realized my Olympic dreams were over sometime in high school, I was like, okay, I'm probably not going to go run for like a Power Five D1 school, but I
Yeah.
still want to stay in the sport in some way. And I think I
Sure.
found it through this medium. You found it through being an agent. What was that moment like when you realized you didn't have a future in the sport in that capacity? What were the emotions around that? And how did you ultimately figure out an avenue and a path to stay within it?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think it probably would have happened at NC State not too long after I transferred. And it was an easy conclusion to come to because we had such good runners on the team. For as good as I was, I wasn't sniffing Ryan Hill or Andrew Colley, and those two guys were my teammates. And even after then, there was a slew of other guys, Bobby Moldovan, Adam Hankin, Patrick Campbell, Sandy Roberts, all these guys were on my team at NC State, and you know, there'd be days where I'd be buried. And I think soon, probably 2 or 3 years in NC State, I realized, hey, I could probably give this thing a go, but I'm not gonna probably be an Olympian. And so I've actually been asked that before, like, you know, how'd you know that this is what you wanted to do? And I actually can't pinpoint a moment. Um, I, I, I don't know if it was convenience. Um, I, I think it wasn't forward thinking because that's not where that's not who I was back then. I wasn't this big forward thinker. I think it's some way it got planted in my head. But what I did do was once I thought that would be a cool gig to have, being in the agent world, is I used all the resources that I did have and contacted agencies to see if I could have any sort of relationship with them. So I was very lucky in the sense that one of my roommates, Michael Mancy, his dad was best friends with Ray, my boss. And so I kind of parlayed that relationship into having a conversation with Ray.
How important do you think networking is? Because I think when I view the opportunities I get, when I view sometimes the athletes I get on through you, or just other avenues through the sport, it's like, it's truly who you know. And that's not just exclusive to the sport of running. It's like,
Hmm.
I see this all the time with friends who apply for jobs. It's like they can be, or apply for, like try to get into college. I experienced this with myself. It doesn't really matter how impressive you are on paper. It's like the person who knows the person hiring will always get the job. How crucial was that in that process, as you mentioned, like having that connection and
Yeah,
then making a name and case for yourself?
it's everything for me. This is not I'm not a rags to riches story. I got lucky, and I got lucky because I had a connection. But if I'm giving myself any credit, is that I explored it. I knew
Hmm.
where it was. So yeah, connections in my world is essential.
What would you say to someone out there in terms of like, I don't know, new idea here? You can almost increase your base surface level of luck for having more connections if you just play your cards right. Like you to realize you had that connection, you probably had to think. You probably had to be like, okay, how do I get connected to someone in this world? Is there anyone I possibly know who is? And I'm sure you do that on a daily basis with like athletes, getting them into specific races. How would you say someone can like increase their base surface luck for knowing the right people who can open the right opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think communication is key, and just being out there, being where you want to be, having conversations with people, being persistent. I was very persistent with Ray. I don't know if he actually wanted to hire me at first. I was probably some kid that he got calls just like mine a lot, and so I was very persistent. And I think what college was really good for me is developing relationship skills. I wasn't necessarily the best student, but I developed relationships with a lot of people, and a lot of people I'm still friends with today. And so that same skill set, that same thing you learn when you're a young man, when you're at college at 19, and you grow into someone differently when you leave. And those skill sets of you know, making friends, learning to be honest with people, um, having a human connection with your teammates and your coaches. Those are the most valuable skill sets that I learned in college. And between persistency, just doing the work and being honest, those three things are crucial in gaining trust for people. Because if you don't have trust, then you're dead in the water.
I know a lot of people struggle with the identity shift when they're like out of the sport. What was that
Yeah.
process like for you when you graduated college?
It wasn't so bad for me because I was still in the sport, and I was okay with it. I like at that point in time, I knew I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, and my personal running aspirations were it just kind of moved down the priority list. So for me, the transition wasn't so um, it wasn't so monumental. I know that's not what a lot of people can say, but I was lucky enough to where I graduated in 2014 and started working for Ray, and then I went to Europe that summer. And the person I was hanging out with the most was Ryan Hill. So what like the first like 3 or 4 months of post college for me didn't look too much different than like my life in college. And the year before that, I had done an internship in Europe for Ray, and the year before that, I had done a job shadow for him. So it was a pretty smooth transition. I think the biggest transition for me was the journey from going from what I was doing to what I wanted to do, if that makes sense.
I want to ask you this question before I forget to ask it to you as someone who's a successful agent in the sport. What would you say to someone out there who wants to keep their foot in the door in the sport, but isn't running, 3:59 the mile as a high school or 3:48 in college, and they're like,
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to stay in.
Well, I think the first thing is you have to love it. If you don't love it, and it's not for everybody, right? And that's okay. But if you do love it and you want to continue doing it, just it can be done. You just have to move some things around. Training may look a little differently than it did before. Expectations may change, but I think if the good outweighs the bad, you go for it. But it's nothing's going to be easy either, you know. And if you go out of college like me, and if I had the same expectations that I had in college, working a full-time job and trying to further my career, I may have been pretty disappointed.
What was that shift like? So you become an agent, you start working with Ray Flynn, pinnacle of the sport in that world. Was it a hard transition? Did you pick it up quick? And what are some of like the core components, skills that you needed to learn early on to become a successful agent?
Um, yeah, I think the biggest transition for me was kind of making my own connections and the right connections in the sport. And that didn't happen overnight. I'm still doing that, right? So I think that was the biggest transition, if you will, over across a number of years was, you know, showing up to work every day and doing things that I may not envision doing because that's what needed to be done, and finding avenues where I added value to the team. So I like telling this story. It, you know, I thought being an agent, it was going to be this super sexy thing. You'd be signing all these deals and traveling the world and stuff like that. And I did travel a lot, but my first job for Ray was taking his daughter to the Nike store because uh, Cap had given his daughter some gift cards to the Nike store. That was the very first thing he had me do. So I was essentially babysitting his kid, and that's not what I wanted to be doing, but I did it, and um, I found avenues that didn't necessarily weren't my passions, and but I saw that there were a need for our company, like social media. Instagram started when I was junior in college, I think, sophomore in college. Facebook had been around, but Ray and Brad, they had no presence on social media, and so I said I can create you an account. I can run the account. I can post pictures. I bought a camera and took photos of the athletes and stuff like that. Um, Kyle Merber still calls me the social media manager because that's essentially what I was. I went around, I took photos, and I did all that stuff. Um, but my point is, it's not what I wanted to be doing, but I recognize is that I needed to create value for myself, and I needed to gain trust from Ray and Brad that I added value to the team. And as you do that, you start getting little crumbs, right? And so you start doing more of the things you like to do, and then there's more, and then there's more, and then of course you have to execute and you have to do a good job of them. But you don't get to your dream position doing your dream job by just showing up the first day and expecting it's just going to be there in your hands. Your podcast, you didn't start the podcast expecting to have millions of views the first year, right? You had to work at it. And it was no different for me. I had to do the crappy jobs. And and I think that's what happened. That's what happens to a lot of people. I think, um, a lot of people expect to just jump right in, and when um, it's not exactly what they want to be doing right away, they kind of bail. And so, I think sticking in it, staying persistent, doing the work is just huge. Just doing stuff. Um, I spoke to a class at ETSU, and I said, the quote like, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, is bullshit. You're still gonna have to work hard if you love it. You're gonna have to work hard regardless of if you love your job or not. And so I don't even know where I'm going with this at this point now. I forgot your question.
No, keep going. It's great. No, I think it's so good. Um, Something you mentioned there that I do want to double tap on that I think is really valuable is that concept of like providing value. And it sounds, based on how you were talking about it, you provided value in areas that weren't asked of you. And for me, as someone who works with people under me, freelancers, etc., or just studies successful teams, businesses, um, like the key as a prospective employee who wants to climb is, yeah, it's doing dirty work that your boss doesn't even know they had that issue. Like
Yeah,
Ray probably didn't even know Instagram existed, and you're like, oh, here's this platform, like let me create your profile, here's the value that it'll provide
yeah.
you. How crucial was that back in the day, do you think, for longevity within that career, in terms of Ray thinking early on like, oh, this is less of just this kid who reached out and more like someone who's actually providing value to me in ways
I
that I'm
don't,
not even asking
yeah.
for?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him. I think Ray appreciated that I showed up to work every day and did exactly what he needed me to do. And when I brought new ideas to him, and if he shut them down, I go back and bring other stuff to him, right? And so I think if you're a boss, all you're looking for is people who work hard and people who are loyal. And I was, if anything, those two things when I first started out. I think I just showed up to work every day and did my job, and um, did everything he asked me to do, and was loyal, and just did any work that he gave me. And I think that allowed him to trust me to get work done, which allowed him to give me bigger jobs and bigger roles and grow into kind of where I'm at now. So how much value did I add to him from the start? I don't know. I think it was more than anything, it was goodwill, and goodwill goes a long way.
Very base question to start off this kind of next discussion I want to have with you. What is an agent, for someone out there who doesn't know?
An agent is a lot of things. The first thing that people think of when they think of an agent is going to be the sexy Jerry Maguire, willing and dealing, and getting contracts for athletes. And in our sport, that's primarily shoe companies that pay their living, and we of course do that. But along with that is the logistics of getting into meets, and then the logistics of getting to those meets. So getting from A to B and back again. Um, and so those would be the two biggest cornerstones of what we do. And then of course our company puts on Melrose games too, so that's a big part of what Fun Sports does as well. So it's a holistic approach, starting with the relationship with the athlete to hopefully garnering them a shoe sponsorship deal, and then the real work starts after that. Once you have a sponsorship deal, you still have to be an agent, meaning you have to work hand in hand with their coach and with their company to make sure they get the best opportunities they can year in and year out. And so we do the meat part of things, and the coaches do the coaching part of things, and hopefully we we work hand in hand, and it goes smoothly.
I'm sure you've studied other sports, or know agents from other sports. What's the biggest difference between being an agent in the sport of running versus NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, whatever it might be? A
Well,
lot
the
less
the
money.
dollar the dollar amount would be
Yeah.
would be the first thing. Um,
Why is
I
that?
would
Why do you think?
Well, it's popularity. There's TV deals in place, so that's the easiest answer, unless you want to have a separate podcast on that. And I would say like the overhead as a company. there's a lot more overhead that you have to accrue if you're a football or NBA agent because you're paying for training camps. You're maybe paying for their family to live before they get their contract and get their signing bonus. So the money portion is probably the biggest one when it comes to their actual contract and the overhead it takes to actually run the company.
NDAs, I think a lot of people are familiar with this, but the sport of running, almost all contracts are underneath NDAs. That's not really the case with other sports. From your agent perspective and expertise, how much do you think that drives contracts to be as quote unquote cheap as they are?
I don't think it necessarily drives them to be cheap. In my experience, the contracts have only gone up year to year. So if you're a qualified agent, you work with all the companies, and you're hopefully able to get a little bit of leverage and honest leverage with the shoe companies and open up athletes to different options, and hopefully that materializes in a good contract. And so, I haven't seen contracts go down. I've seen contracts only go up. So the NDAs in my world, from a dollars and cents amount, I haven't seen it really affect it. Now, I know the public would like to see the contracts. So if I think probably it affects the public and the fans probably more than it would affect us and
Sure.
in our job.
Playing devil's advocate a little bit here. Don't you think that if athletes knew what other athletes were being paid? So, for instance, let me frame it this way. In the NFL, I've seen this with wide receivers last year. A wide receiver would get paid a ridiculous amount, and then a wide receiver who is under a current contract would want to renegotiate their contract because they were like, well, I'm better than that guy, and I'm being paid less than that guy. That doesn't really exist in the sport, where it's like if two college athletes came out of the college world, signed pro contracts. One signed a, let's say, $500,000 contract. The other one was better than that athlete who signed the $500,000 contract. They'll know they're worth more than $500,000, but that doesn't really exist because of NDAs. What's your perspective on that?
Again, I think that's more of a public thing. We know what everyone makes anyways because we have historical data that
That's fair.
shows
Yeah.
contracts. So if it's with our clients, we know what the data is. And so if we
Mm,
sign an athlete, we'll go back and look. And so if that athlete thinks they're worth something, we can go back and look at results and and see what the market value is. It's a large part of our expertise in being an agent is knowing the market value. So
interesting. So
if the
you
public
basically know that. Yeah. Okay.
so if the public doesn't know the market value or does know the market value, I don't think it would really change the final dollar and cents amount. Now, it would put probably us under some pressure if we didn't get the best deal you could get. At the end of the
Sure.
day, it's the athlete's choice because they're the one that's going to be living the life,
So you're basically
not me.
saying, yeah, the athletes and the agents all basically know how much everyone makes, and so therefore
I don't
can.
know. I mean, if you're a college athlete, you're gonna have no idea. But that's why you
Sure.
sign with an agent because we have a database of contracts to look at, and we're gonna know the market. Now, an athlete may have a better idea if you're renegotiating their second or third contract, but and that people are usually not too far off.
Fascinating. That's super interesting perspective. This is why I have you on, Matt. This is good stuff. This is good stuff. So basically, that the world I described already exists. People just don't know about it.
Yeah, I
Because for
mean,
some reason I thought
it's
agents
where
didn't
our
fully
value
know.
is. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
where our value is.
super fascinating. What would you say are some of the biggest ways as an agent that the sport can change to pay athletes more money? Do you think it's directly reliant on the shoe companies to pay more? Is it reliant on the sport to grow? Is it what's your take on that?
We're getting into how to save the sport conversation, Dom. I don't know if I like that. Um, again, I can't be too critical because if you were talking to an athlete 10 years ago and you're telling that athlete what the athletes are making now, they would say, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's great. Like I wasn't making that much money and now X amount of people are making that much money." So it's all about perspective. And so what I've seen over the last 10 to 15 years is a sport that is continually paying athletes more money. So, you know, I think the biggest issue in this sport is how to capitalize on the amount of people who participate in it from high school to having those people be fans of the sport as as a profession. And so I'll leave it at that. That if you can capitalize on the number of people who participate in it, which I feel like in a way too, with the post-COVID running boom, you're starting to see that materialize a lot, at least in the number of entries and participants in marathons and these newly formed run clubs. But holistically, I think it is about perspective because, you know, in 10 years, I'll talk to the athletes we're representing now and tell them what the people 10 years from now are making. And hopefully the sport continues to grow like it has been the last 10 years, and they're in an even better place. I think it's just a slow burn, a small needle each year.
You mentioned like 2 questions ago that the contracts have only gotten bigger and bigger. Is that due to the shoe companies being more profitable? For instance, Hoka and On didn't really exist 10 years ago. They did, but not really. Or is it something else? Is it, the sport getting more popular? Is it the athletes advocating for themselves more? Like, what's the reason behind contracts getting bigger?
Well, my mind goes to there being just more companies first. So 10 years ago, On wasn't a company, right? Hoka, I don't even know if Hoka was a company 10 years ago or not, but they're a new company, right? So you have new companies emerging into the space that are able maybe to, one, offer good contracts, and two, it creates a space for more athletes to get sponsored. So my mind goes to there's probably more competition in the space, um, with more companies, which provides more opportunities, which breeds competition, with I think inevitably helps the contracts get bigger.
So many questions. I'm losing my train of thought. Contracts, athletes, the sport growing. Um, in terms of companies, I was going to ask you this. I've noticed with agents, like there are definitely specific companies that are more. Certain agents have more of a direct phone line to them. You'll see athletes who are represented by an agent go to more specific companies, just across the board. How does that come to be? Is it just because certain people are closer friends with other people and they get the first call or first opportunity? And how, as an agent, do you kind of leverage that and make sure, a certain company is thinking of you when they are wanting to sign an athlete?
Well, that just starts with relationships, and we work with all the companies. If you go down our roster list, we have athletes with almost every single brand, and so we believe that gives the athletes the most opportunities, because again, ultimately, I think the athletes just want to know what their options are, and our biggest job is telling them what those options are, seeing if they're viable options, and then if they are viable options, exploring more in depth what that means, and then letting the athlete choose which company is right for them. Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. Once they sign that contract, they're living with it, not us. So we take a very personal approach in saying, well, it needs to be more of an athlete decision with us giving them the pros and cons, um, of the contract and saying, well, where do you think you can be most successful? Where do you think you can be most happy? Because if you're happy and you're enjoying where you're at, then you're more than likely going to run better. Now, not every athlete gets to have three or four different options, and they have one, and they either have to take it or don't take it, and the decision is harder. But in theory, we try to take a holistic approach that way. And so, yeah, some agents don't have as many, as close relationships with the other brands, and it's not for me to say how they do their business. All I can speak on is kind of how what our approach is.
Sure, totally. Obviously, before you sell the athlete to company or companies, you kind of have to sell yourself to the athlete because, top NCAA athlete coming out of college, I'm sure, has all the different agents
Yeah.
and agent companies reaching out to them, trying to get them to sign on to them. What do you feel like distinguishes you and you guys from other agents? And is that a hard process, like trying to get the right athletes on board?
It's competitive as you can imagine. It's probably again, I'll go back to something we spoke on earlier. Is relationships are very important. And the people the athletes trust the most are going to be their coaches. And so I try to have a good relationship with the coaches around the country. I hope they trust me and trust that I'm going to do the right thing by their kid. And um, I speak to them a lot. And um, when they feel like it's ready to have a conversation, I try to have a conversation and um, just like I'm doing here, and I answer as many questions as I can with them. And that's really all you can do. Um, I learned a long time ago you can't get too upset by the no's. You're not going to be in this job very long. But my dad always told me all they can say is no. So I'm not afraid to hear a no. All I can do is be myself and be honest and hope it's a yes. And then if it's a no, say, hey, no hard feelings. See you around the circuit because inevitably you will see all these people around the circuit anyways. So you move on, you do the best you can, and but the biggest thing is the relationship. So whether it's with the college coach and then if you're lucky enough to have those conversations with the athletes, it's hopefully the athletes have a connection to you as well because they have to be able to trust you.
NILs, what's your take on them? How do you feel like they are affecting the sport, will affect the sport in the years to come?
Yeah, NILs has been probably the biggest change to our industry in the last 3 or 4 years. It's certainly made the recruiting a little different in that it's kind of opened the flood doors on when you can talk to people. So that would be the biggest change. Now, we of course, we think NILs are great. I think if you're a college, I mean, if you went to college, Dom, and did this, you'd be able to make money on it. And so we do feel like if you're a college student, you should be able to make money. And so normal college students can go get jobs and earn money. And so why not track and field and cross country athletes? So look, we of course like them. You'd probably have to ask the athletes themselves if how it's affected them. I don't know if it's added any more pressure. I'm sure it has a little bit. I think there's some of these NIL deals are smoke and mirrors. But I think maybe some of the younger athletes probably feel like that they need to have it because someone else has it.
Sure.
So if that's why you want an NIL deal, it may not be the best for you. You still have to earn it. You still have to run well. Um, but you shouldn't be running well so you can get an NIL deal. You should be running and training well
Because
for
you love
the
it.
other reasons
Yeah.
because eventually it's going to catch up to you. So, you know, those situations are tough and, it may add some pressure to some young athletes, which is never the intention of it. But overall, I do think the good outweighs the bad.
Are those contracts more complicated, complex in the sense of, you know, if an athlete is good enough to sign an NIL deal with a major shoe company, odds are they're going to go pro and they're probably going to be one of the best in the pro world eventually. And so I'm sure these contracts, I know they all have like the first right of refusal clause and all that sort of stuff, as well as a lot of these contracts have, whatever, the language better than I ever would. Does that make them more complex in terms of like a shoe company, a Nike, a Brooks, whoever it might be, you could fill in the blank. I'm just using random shoe
Mhm.
companies are going to add in extra because it's a longer ball game.
No, no,
No,
actually, it's simpler. It's a smaller
really.
contract. Yeah, I mean, as an NIL, the purity of NIL is so it's not pay to play. So you
Hmm.
can't have any bonuses in there. You can't have anything that would reward an athlete for running. So the contract inherently is smaller and actually simpler.
What do you think the net benefit is to major shoe companies for signing NILs? Because a lot of these colleges, the athletes can't even wear the shoes.
It's our big buzzword,
Yeah.
relationships. That's it. I mean, a lot of the shoe companies will do different things with the athletes. Some choose not to do as much, and they'll say, look, we don't want to encumber them. We don't want it to be a pressure cooker. And that's their strategy. Some companies will decide to use them a lot on a lot of things to market them, and that's their strategy. No, neither one of them are better than the other, but they both want it so they can have the relationship with the athlete, because the long term goal is to ultimately have that relationship after they graduate college, so they can do they can do whatever they want.
Sure. So it's like an initial deposit to get their name, the
Yeah,
shoe company. Yeah,
yeah,
that's fascinating.
yeah.
If you were at a major shoe company, how would you approach signing athletes, whether it's NIL, professional? What would be your strategy to get the best people on your team?
I was going to answer just on the best ones. Um, I haven't been asked that before. I probably try to take the same approach that I take now, being an agent, and having a relationship with the coaches, gaining trust, being able to have honest conversations with the athletes, and hopefully they will come our way.
You may or may not like this conversation. You can shut it down if you don't, because I know you said state of the sport. But like with GST and just the sport shifting rapidly. I mean, you mentioned Red Claw, like the whole state of the sport, whether it's every boy and their mother breaking four in high school, Ethan Strand running 3:48, Gary running similar time, the pros running so fast, Grand Slam track, or just culturally, like you mentioned, run clubs, like they're everywhere. They're gaining rapidly. More people are running than ever. Like, what's your take on the state of the sport, where we're going, and how you think that will change contracts, athletes, incentives, kind of everything underneath that umbrella?
Yeah, look, I think it's great. I think our sport is way too niche to gatekeep new ideas. I think, there's the worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work and then someone tries something new. But I think the act of trying something new shouldn't be necessarily criticized. I think the same people who are probably criticizing Grand Slam track were the same people saying we need new ideas before it happened. So I don't think you can't have your cake and eat it too. So will GST be successful in the long run? I hope so. We'll have to see. But there's one thing I'm not going to do is criticize them for trying.
In terms of getting athletes in races, whether it's a contracted Grand Slam or a Diamond League, or I was going to say Millrose, but maybe that's not the best because you guys run that, so it's a little different. Like, is that a difficult process advocating for your athletes to run in the Diamond? I know a lot of these like race directors are pretty stingy with who they let in. That's like a whole nother subset of your job we haven't talked
Mhm.
about. What's that
Yeah.
world like?
Yeah, well, look, the meets that you mentioned are at the highest level of the sport. So, not everyone's going to get in, and not everyone gets proposed. So, at a very base level, you have to be performing well, or you're not gonna get in. So that probably makes our job easier in a sense for the higher level meets, because you do have to be at a certain level to get in. Now, our job is to advocate for the athletes and be persistent and maybe sometimes annoying to let them in. And so we will do that. So it is that's probably the bulk of our job, because a lot of people want to get into those meets. But again, there are a lot of them. So if you don't get into one, you may get into another. If you don't get into them, you get them into the best meet you can.
I want to ask you this. I know you're a guy with goals, dreams, ambitions. You've had them when you were a runner. I'm sure you have them now as an agent. Where do you see yourself going? I know you're young in this profession, but you've been in it for quite some time now. Like, what's your long-term vision with this? Do you want to stay as an agent? Do you want to move on to something else? Do you want to stay within the sport? How do you view your life from a, top-down
Yeah.
perspective?
Yeah, I love where I'm at. I'll never leave, honestly. This is a company that gave me a shot, and I'm a pretty loyal guy. So there's no reason for me to leave at this moment. I love who I work with. I love where I live. I have an amazing family, amazing wife, two wonderful kids. I live in a great state and a great city.
Go Vols.
Go Vols, baby. And yeah, I in 10 years, I hope to just keep doing the same thing, continue to be successful. I think it's easy to have like I think what's so impressive about what everyone will agree is what's so impressive about Jakob is how long he's been on top, not how that he's on top at all. So if I can sustain, um, you know, what I'm doing now for 10 years, I'll be a happy guy.
How do you balance on a personal level being married, having two kids? I know you travel a lot for your job. I also thought this earlier on in the conversation when you were talking about graduating from college and running not being as high of a priority, even
Mhm.
something like running, which I'm sure you love to do. Like when you look at your schedule and the crazy demands on every which way, how do you figure
Yeah.
out like what gets your time?
Well, first off, I have an amazing wife. It doesn't work without her. And so she holds the house down and, is just does a fantastic job of raising our two kids when I'm gone. Um, After that, I get up at 5 a.m. and I go run. I get all my stuff done in the morning, and I go to work. And I been doing try to do a very good job of just being where my feet are at. So, focusing on where I'm at the current moment, and sacrificing probably some stuff with my friends that I would normally jump on. There's a couple alumni events where the guys get together every year, go to a football game or something, and usually those are the type of things that fall through the cracks because with as much as time that I travel, being gone an additional weekend just to hang out with the boys it's not a good look. So I try to be where my feet are at, and if I'm not traveling, I try to be at home, try to be present, try to do fun things with my kids, and try to be actively involved at during their day to day. So again, I'll get up at 5, I'll go for my run, I'll get the kids ready for school, and I'll drop them off at school. And that's like if I'm home not traveling, that's what I'm gonna do. Um, and then if my oldest Davis has just started playing soccer and flag football, so I'm gonna try to be at every single one of his games. So just trying to keep my priorities in check, and then sometimes that means sacrificing some fun personal stuff, and I have to be okay with that.
I was a kid once. I remember negotiating with my parents all the time about every which thing of what movie we watched, whether I was allowed to watch a movie, when I would go to bed, whatever it might have been. Someone who negotiates professionally for his job contracts. Has that helped you negotiating with your kids?
Not at all. Not at
No
all.
crossover.
No. No, no, zero crossover. In fact, it probably it makes me go into the office having less confidence.
I love
No,
it. We talked.
there's no negotiating with a 5-year-old.
No, there really isn't. There really isn't. We talked forward future minding of like what you want to accomplish. I do want to ask you a question about the past, which is, you invest in your athletes' lives. It's apparent from talking to you, from seeing you from afar. What moment were you most nervous about in your entire career? Like whether it was a race, like what was the moment that you were like, I can't watch this race. I gotta close my eyes.
From an Asian perspective, or just holistic running,
Agent, someone you had personal
the
investment
the
in.
the Olympic 1500-meter final in Paris, 100%.
Who was your athlete in that?
No,
Cole?
we had all three.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
So that was probably the most exciting 3 minutes and 30 seconds of your life then afterward.
yeah. It's a
Yeah,
complete kind of blackout moment. But yeah, just amazing.
crazy. Few final questions for you. First, final serious one for you. For those who have listened to our conversation today, what's the final takeaway message that you want to leave with them?
Yeah, I would just say, look, if whether you're working to live or living to work, you're gonna have to put in the time. You're gonna have to gain trust, and it's not gonna happen right away. So if the good outweighs the bad, stick in it and stay persistent. Um, do the work and find where value is needed.
Matt, final question for you. The question I ask every single guest on every single podcast. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you personally choose to make for him?
Oh God. I like a very baseline average cook. Um, I'm gonna say like some sort of salmon dish. Me and my wife cook salmon a decent amount. I've been doing some good burgers recently. My 5-year-old tells me I cook a mean hot dog, so maybe I'm cooking a hot dog.
I love it. 5-year-old saying it. It's got to be true. So, last question for you, I guess. 2025 Tennessee football record. What do you got? What do you got them coming in at?
Um, I want to say with Joey as the quarterback now, I'd be happy with an 8-4 season.
Okay.
I'd be happy with 8-4 season. NC State Wolfpack, where I went to school, I'd say 8-4 as well.
On the
If we
come
can
up.
get dual 8-win seasons, I'd be happy.
There you
One
go.
one one season will be slightly more impressive than the other.
Well, Matt, just across the border, you're welcome to be an Ohio State fan any day of the week. We will not disappoint you.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, that's probably one of my top 3 least favorite teams.
Terrible. I will say it's funny because I lived in Austin for a short period, and so I'm a dual UT and Ohio State fan, which doesn't really make sense. So in that semifinal game, I was thrilled. I was like, I can't lose here. And then it's really cool because UT comes to Columbus for their season opener. It'll be Archie's first full debut game.
Oh,
And
Texas UT. The real
yeah,
UT is
sorry, you're
University of
right.
Tennessee.
You're right. What's funny though, Matt, is I grew up in Toledo, and so University of Toledo was UT. So when I first moved to Austin, people are like UT. I was like, Toledo? You know what? You're so right. I'm confused.
The Battle of Alma wouldn't have been won without the Volunteers.
That's true. That is very true. I will say, from an SEC school perspective, before I keep wanting to say UT before Texas, there is something cool about Tennessee. I have always liked the program across all sports. I feel like it's really good people. So, and there's something about Tennessee where it's like it's the South, but it's not too Southern, and it's good people. So, anyways, I'm a loose UT, University of Tennessee fan.
Well,
so
we can have you.
Well, Matt, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the conversation. Really appreciate it. People have long asked me to get an agent on, so it was a real privilege and honor to have you on as the first and to pick your brain on everything and go through your running career, which you don't deem so successful, but I deem as that was the career I would have wanted growing up. So congratulations on all the success, and excited to continue to follow along your path with Flint Sports and the impact you make in your athletes' lives and beyond. So keep crushing it, man.
Appreciate it, Dom.